Welcome back to another episode of Staying in Touch. I'm your host, Mariana Villareal, and today we have a very special guest. We have with us Dr. Johnson. He is an ER doctor, has been in the industry for about 9 years now. So welcome, and thank you for taking the time of your busy schedule to do this with us.
Well, thank you all for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Thank you. So, when people think ER doctor, there's a lot of shows on TV, like Untold Stories of the ER, like one of the oldest on TLC, And so we think very traumatic situations. So throughout these years, I'm pretty sure you've seen quite a bit of things. And, what would you describe like a typical day in the ER?
Oh, man, the answer to that is a typical day is always atypical. No 2 days are alike, which is one of the things I always like about it, because I would get bored with monotony. So going in and never knowing what to expect is something that I do enjoy. To break down a very typical day, I work mainly night shifts. If not, sometimes I'll do the morning shift. So I don't like the middle shift. And so it's a little bit different when you're doing nights and mornings. When you come in, the other person's leaving, so you pretty much take over the whole ER. So you got to sign out, start your day with sign out, and then you just kind of start the flow of kind of what's coming in and go from there. So I wish I could say better, like typical, expect this sort of thing, but for the most part, we tend to have a lot of rushes early in the morning and a lot of rushes in the evening, like the kind of the after school evening. So we'll get busy kind of those different times a day, and then. Not typical daily, but typical yearly, we do have different flow depending upon what season it is. And so believe it or not, like working where I work down in Dublin, Georgia, the fall season is actually probably one of our biggest trauma seasons, because we have a lot of people that go there for hunting. So we have a lot of people falling out of their deer stands. The worst traumas in our area are these UTVs, so the big like side-by-sides. People treat them like they're go-karts, but they can go 50 miles per hour. And so a lot of people don't wear their seatbelts. A lot of people will drink and ride the side-by-sides. And so fall is kind of one of our big trauma seasons. And then the winter, you kind of get your more respiratory infections in the winter. Right. And the summer, you get your more heat-related illness and things like that. So it's always changing.
Something new.
Yeah. Something new.
So what motivated you to pursue a career like instead of just doing a regular specialty doctor? What pushed you to go into like emergency medical situations?
So I was kind of somewhat born into it. So my dad and stepdad are both ER docs. And my stepdad, he went back, he did family medicine. Actually, both my dads did family medicine, and then both went back and did ER. And so my stepdad went back and did ER in the mid-90s. So I remember very clearly the Olympics being here. And I don't know, but if a lot of people, I guess in my age range will remember this, the bombing at the Centennial Olympic Park. And my dad was chief resident at Grady at the time. And like they had the beepers, and he like had a beeper like, with a code that he had to look up. And it was like all hands on deck. Because they didn't know how many people were coming in. So I remember always being motivated by the stories he told me. When he was going back into residency again, I was like 8 to 11. So it was a very impressionable time, and I loved hearing his stories and my dad's stories from Birmingham. Then when I did med school, I really wanted to go. Actually, one of the guys who works here, Carlos, he was my roommate in college. We all loved that show Nip Tuck. And I was like, I'm going to be a plastic surgeon and do all this cool stuff. And then I got to med school and I did surgery rotation, and I just hated it. I mean, it was like, did not like getting up at 4:30 in the morning every day. Didn't kind of like the vibes of surgery. And I found that I liked a little bit of everything. And when you work ER, it's nice because, you like OB. Well, guess what? You can deliver babies and do OB stuff. And you like surgery and like trauma, you get to see trauma. So I kind of liked everything. So kind of just went that route.
You went that route.
And I don't regret it. Yeah, I really enjoy it.
Well, I mean, I feel like you have to be very strong for that, just because, I mean, I don't know if you have a therapist to kind of like express everything that you see. And I think it can be kind of traumatic at some points. But you working in the medical field, obviously the United States healthcare system is not the best, but obviously having health insurance is important.
Yeah.
So what being, in it and seeing how many things might not be covered by health insurance, even though some things are not covered, like, is it still important to have health insurance in the United States?
Yeah, I would definitely say so. For me, in the ER, we have a law called EMTALA, and which was put in place a long time ago to essentially make sure that everyone has availability to emergency services. So for me, I don't think about it that much because when somebody comes in, I don't know if they're insured or not, and I don't really care. Where I tend to care if somebody is insured is when they leave the ER, because that's where it becomes really, really tough. And so I'll give you two really good examples. So somebody recently I had who got shot in the arm, had a fracture in his arm. We were able to got everything completely stabilized, got him splinted, sent him to follow up. He didn't have insurance. It was $500 like cash pay option to see the orthopedic surgeon. He never did. He didn't get his cast off. He had a much worse outcome. And so that is one of the things that's really tough is when somebody has something and I need them to have something after they leave the ER. And the biggest one that I'm seeing right now, over the last few years, I've seen a really big rise in cancer. It seems like I am diagnosing cancer way more than I used to. It used to seem like something I diagnosed once every month or two, and now it seems like every other shift, I'm the one diagnosing cancer with a CT or something like that. Wow. And in that situation, there is a lot to do afterwards. So you have somebody with a new onset tumor that you think's cancer. Well, they need to go and see either their primary or a cancer doc. Then they need to get set up with interventional radiology a lot of times to do a biopsy or a surgery to find out what type of cancer it is. Then they have to get the path report results from that and figure out how to treat it. And so when somebody doesn't have any insurance, so often they'll end up getting lost to follow-up. And having a family member who had cancer and went through that process, it always drives me crazy. So I'm always trying to figure out ways to, work the healthcare system when people are uninsured to figure out. And a lot of times I find I have uninsured people that that sometimes have means, and it's just like telling them about a cash option or something. But that is the most difficult part for me is when they leave and I know that they're not going to get the care that they need because they don't have insurance and they don't know how to navigate the American healthcare system.
So if you had one thing that you could change of our healthcare system, I mean, maybe like right now that there's a whole election thing going on, you might want to listen to this, the people that are running for it, like healthcare is very important. And being basically upfront, having all these cases, what's one thing that you would wish could change about it?
We could do an entire podcast on this part, and you're 100% right. I am pleased that we are talking about healthcare more in this election than we ever have before, which is something that is nice. The biggest thing that I would change, in my opinion, the American healthcare system is a system that is set up for essentially, here's a disease, here's the med. That's what it is. And I don't think that we spend as much time as other countries or other cultures in looking at, well, why did I get diabetes? Not, here it's just, let's start metformin, And so I think the biggest thing that I would change would be putting a much bigger focus on health as a whole rather than just kind of a pharmaceutical approach to, okay, you got this disease, let's do this. And I will say that over the last few years, like you mentioned earlier, I've only been an ER doc 9 years now, but I was only, 5 years in when COVID started, and then there was a lot of big changes in the ER world. For my dads who worked for 40 years, that was like the biggest change they had in their whole career was everything that happened around COVID. I have seen a lot more people that seem to be taking their healthcare into their own hands and learning more and listening more and listening to podcasts and listening to people talk. And so that is something that I do see a positive momentum forming for people kind of taking back their own healthcare, at least learning about their own healthcare. Yeah. And I will say on that note that there was kind of sometimes in the medical community there can be this negative reaction to doing your own research. Well, just trust what I say. And I disagree. I think it's great when people are doing their own research, and because that means that they're actually caring about their health care and caring about what's going on. So
they call him Dr. Google.
Yeah. I mean, there is times where, you have somebody come to the ER and they're like, oh, I got a headache. Do I have a brain bleed? And
like, I'm dying.
Exactly.
Yeah. I think there has to be like a balance between it. Obviously, a medical opinion should come along with some kind of research. And most people don't know, but some health insurance companies actually incentivize their members to have like preventative care. And when we think preventative care is like, oh, go to a PCP, get your annual checkups. No, it's way more than that. They'll make you read information like, hey, this is how you can have a healthier lifestyle. Hey, if you do certain amount of steps, like we'll give you some points that maybe you can cash out later on. Or, hey, did you get any of your shots or for like the flu or whatever, flu season's coming in. So there's a lot of incentives that health insurance are even putting out there for people to also start getting healthier before they get to that, like, oh crap, I need to use my insurance a lot more now.
Yeah.
You know, and so it is a little bit of kind of like us doing our own research and making sure that we're healthy, because the United States has, I think, one of the unhealthiest countries in the world, like with everything that we have going on. But with that being said as well, it's okay, we have health insurance, but I think a lot of people also forget about something very important, and it's life insurance.
Oh, yeah.
So I always say health insurance pays some of the medical bills, but who's going to be paying your day-to-day bills when you can't go back to work?
Yeah.
So how do you feel about life insurance?
Yeah, so kind of new to me within the last few years. I didn't really think about it much when I was doing residency and first coming out. All your kind of insurance and stuff is like part of your package. So it was kind of like out of sight, out of mind for me. And then it's like all of a sudden I got in the real world and I was like, okay, I got a health, disability, life, looking into all of it. So personally, I have 2 life insurance policies, and I was blown away at how many different types of policies there are. So I got one originally that was just your very generic, if I were to die, this amount of money, would go to my beneficiary, whoever I choose. And then recently, within the last couple of years, I did another life insurance policy where essentially I pay monthly. And once it gets to a certain point, I can kind of use it for my own benefit too, which is nice, because I think that's one of the things that, especially with a young person, we don't like to really think about our mortality, I guess. Right. And so if you're somebody saying, hey, you want to spend this much money each month, and if you die, somebody else gets it, you're like, well, I don't really want to die. I don't really, you don't really think about that type of stuff. But so there are policies that can do a lot of different things. And then on top of that, being in the ER, it's very frequently that I see people that have not planned, or there's people our age that die and have no clue that that's going to happen, obviously. So I have a story from not too long ago where it's like literally a healthy person with his family doing breakfast, goes and eats with his buddies every morning. The weather's nice, so he decides not to take his car, took his motorcycle, got hit by a deer and died. And it's like he had just left his house, And so situations like that, as much as no one wants to think about them, they happen. Yeah. And so, like you said, leaving something, especially in the situation where like that person was the breadwinner for the entire family. So leaving something where that, your loved ones will be covered if something were, to happen to you, I think is extremely, extremely important.
And even the case of like, let's say he didn't die, but then he's left disability, you know, like you can no longer work, you can no longer provide for your family. This is when life insurance, living benefits kick in. So it's like a more modern life insurance. There are traditional, the ones that you get through your job, which is just a death benefit, And then there's some that you need to purchase outside of your job where they have more benefits, like those living benefits, in case you can't go back to work. Now you have a financial, basically, blanket for you and your family. And like the one that you were mentioning about, you can later down the road use that money for if you need it. Life insurance now is, okay, if you're scared you're going to die too young, this one works for you. If you're scared that you're going to live too long, this one's for you. So there's options. It's no longer if I die, it's now also if I live too long, then you have those options. But people are scared of life insurance and they think that it's bad juju. I don't think it could be that. I think it's just planning, which goes to, you know, like, how can individuals like plan for their futures? Like specifically now seeing so many young people ending up with diseases, cancer, strokes.
Yeah.
What would you recommend people to do as in like planning for the future?
So that's a great question. So I think that one of the reasons that my generation doesn't like life insurance as much is because everything is so expensive now. We have so many people that I feel like are just living month to month. And so when they're prioritizing their food, their gas, their cell phone bills, it's hard to be like, oh, well, you want me to go and spend this money on this extra thing. So I think that it is getting those conversations out there for me, learning about it. So I have the disability, I have the two different types of life insurance, and it has helped me so much with my planning because now I know I've already used my life insurance policy, the one that I put money in and kind of used as a bank account. I've already used it once for when I had a big unexpected expense, because like you said, there's policies where you can use stuff from your life insurance. I don't know how to tell people to. I think that when we're talking about health in general, I think that financial health is part of that, and I think that a lot of people are so financially illiterate. And you can use those. So for me, every single one of my insurances I use as part of my financial health because I have ones that, you know, help me save on taxes while doing my health insurance with health savings account. I have ones that, like you said, if I were to have an injury that cover and so I don't know. I think talking about it, having more and more people talking about it, I don't want to be that friend that goes out to eat and then we're like, you know, talking about the Braves and UGA football. And then I'm like, well, hey, guys. But it comes up more and more because like we're all having kids and we're all having families and we're thinking about those things. So you do end up talking about them more. But I think that's the biggest thing is just kind of empowering people to learn about it because if they do, I think a lot of people would be interested in doing it, but they've got to know what's actually out there.
Exactly. Like you just mentioned a health savings account.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't know what that is. Can you explain it to them?
Yes. So of all the life insurances out there, health savings account to me is I think the overall best. One, I'm what's called an independent contractor, which means I work for myself essentially, and then I'm paid through different businesses, which means I don't get any sort of benefits at all. So a health savings account is really nice because it saves me money on taxes. It's kind of like a pre-tax vehicle, so I can use it from that standpoint. The way that you can set them up is you can set them up for different things. So somebody like me, I have no medical problems. I try my best to take care of my health and stay on top of my health. And so I don't really wouldn't spend a lot of money like on seeing physicians. Now there's a lot of people that have 3 or 4 specialists they see a couple times a year. They spend more money on that. So a really good example is my current girlfriend's dad was telling me, we were talking, he doesn't spend a lot of money on his health insurance, but he literally goes to his primary care twice a year. And his primary care doctor told him that when he comes, he only gets $125 from the health insurance for seeing him. So you can imagine and he gets paid through I think he's essentially retired military and things like that. So his insurance is covered. Mm-hmm. But you can imagine if somebody's paying $1,000 a month for their insurance, $12,000 a year, and they only see a primary care doc twice, and that doctor's only getting $250. It's like, where's all this other money going? So that's one of the things I really like about the health savings account, specifically for healthy people. You can set up a policy where you are covered for an emergency or a disaster policy. So essentially, that would be a lot cheaper because they're not going to be covering all these medications and cardiologist visits and diabetes and stuff like that. But if you were to get bit by a copperhead or get into a bad accident on 85 and have this emergency, you would be covered. But the way that the policies, a lot of them work is you have a bunch of extra money that then you can access for your own personal things. And that is what I love about a health savings account, because the people that I see that are the healthiest are the ones that, like we talked about, are taking their health ahead of time. So a health savings account could cover your infrared sauna. And it's like, and that's nice because you're like, oh man, I'm going to spend $1,500 on the sauna. That's a lot of money. But it's like, well, I have this money in my health insurance policy and I can use it for that because we know that people that use a sauna multiple times a week have healthier outcomes, or a gym membership, or there's a lot of things that you can tailor with your health savings account to buy stuff that you're actually using ahead of time rather than just, and I think that's the other thing, my generation, people are like, oh, do I really need health insurance? I'm not going to get into, I'm not going to have any problems. And it's like, well, this is the best of both worlds. It covers you if you have that unexpected event, but then you also have money to spend on stuff that you're interested in spending it on for your health, which is, I think, pretty awesome. So.
Yeah. And I think, again, the whole purpose of this podcast is to have options, to understand what's available out there for the listener to take, the route that fits their lifestyle the best. And so having that, as an option, because some people don't see the value in health insurance, or it might be too expensive, things like that, it can kind of like demotivate somebody to even take care of themselves. But having a health savings account, now because it is your own money and you have it there, you're like, okay, let me use it. And if I'm not using it because I'm ill, let me use it to continue to stay healthy. Exactly. And so with being in the ER, I'm pretty sure that you see quite a bit of things every day. What are some things that you kind of like recommend people to stay healthy? Obviously, we know eat right, get exercise, sleep well. Is there something extra that you can, it'll take it to the next level for people?
Yeah, so it's funny, those things that you mentioned. I think that one of the biggest things is educating yourself on what that means, because here's a good example. I had a patient the other day, and she's diabetic, and her hemoglobin A1C was kind of getting worse. And she doesn't see her primary very often, and she's taking all of her meds. And she's like, I've been eating right. And I'm like, well, what did you eat today? And she was like, well, I had a salad. And I was like, well, what was on your salad? And it's like, so people have these things that they just consider, oh, this is healthy. But then you look at the dressing that she was using and what she was drinking. She was still wanting her sodas and things like that. And it was like she was having so much essentially processed food and carbohydrate intake day to day. And so educating people on what actually is healthy food. I kind of try to make it easy for a lot of my patients in the ER, and I kind of just go with, if God made it, it's probably going to be better than if we made it. So I really am pushing things like meats, cheeses, fruits, vegetables. Those are the things that I really push. But yeah, I think the other thing is, I have seen with the younger generation, because of podcasts specifically, there's a lot of people out there, even within the medical community. I have so many doctors I work with that are unhealthy, and then they start listening to podcasts like Sam Huberman and Andrew Huberman, and some of the other people out there that Gary Brecka's, and actually starting to look into their own health. And I see that every day. The sleep thing too. I sleep horribly, and so I started looking into sleep hygiene. And the number one that I'll have with patients, and I see this with my younger patients more than anyone else, everyone sleeps bad. And the biggest reason that I think that everyone sleeps bad is the cell phone, because every one of my teenager patients who comes in, it's like, what are you doing when you're going to bed? And they're on TikTok, they're scrolling, they've got the lights on, and they're not. So the sleep hygiene has really left. Like back in the day when we didn't have all these entertainment options. Yeah. People they would kind of naturally wind down. It would get dark, and their body would naturally start to, secrete melatonin and other things to get you tired. And we were kind of replacing that. And so those things are true. Outside of that, I do think that exercise is the biggest one. I think that people, especially, and I live in Atlanta, and within the city, it can be harder and harder to exercise, because it's like, oh, I'm in this big building, and oh, the gym is crowded, and the gym doesn't have parking. And so the amount of just getting up and doing something, it's funny, I was just here before starting this podcast, and one of the workers here was walking on a little treadmill while he was working. And he has one of those. So it's getting that exercise wherever you can, and actually getting up and moving. Whenever I have somebody who's like a new diagnosis of especially diabetes or hypertension, I'll say just walk 30 minutes a day and see what happens. Just getting up and moving really makes a huge, huge difference.
Yeah, no. Here at the Alliance Group, everyone that wants treadmill, like the walking pads, still get them for they gifted me one because I wanted one. And awesome. Now in my office I am standing, I'm working, and then I'm walking, because again, we spend so much time sitting. Most people that have that corporate job, it's 8 hours sitting. And so now having that option to just stand and also walk while you're working, I think it's going to help because so many people now have that corporate job. And like you said, even me yesterday, we pull up to the gym and it is packed.
Yeah.
My motivation went down. I was like, oh, but I'm already dressed to work out. I just drove to the closest park, walked the 5-mile trail, and called it a day.
Yeah.
Because I know how important exercise is. And so if you could, on top of that, just how do you think that people should be motivated to have those conversations maybe with their friends and their loved ones? Because like you said, you don't want to be like, ugh, here comes this person. What would you say, like, how could you start the conversation of, hey, take care of yourself and make sure that you are preparing yourself for the future as well?
That's a great question. It's funny. So I was thinking about this the other day because it was my cousin's birthday. And it was like, growing up, I used to see my cousins, even the ones in state every month, the ones out of state 3-4 times a year. And then you become adults and you start to have your own family and you don't see them anymore. So when I see my cousin now, it's always at either my grandmother's 90th birthday, maybe a big holiday every few years type thing, or it's at a funeral. And so as sad as that is, that's like 2 of the last 3 times that I've seen one of my closest cousins was for a funeral, as families have aged and things like that. And so sometimes at those life events is actually a good time to talk about those things because you're in the middle of it right then. I mean, but I don't know that there is ever a good time to just be like, hey, do you want to talk about death? For me, it's like, especially with the life insurance, the policy, the most recent one I got, that really kind of acts as your own bank account for things. That's one of the first times that I was actually excited to tell friends about it because I was like actually using it instead of thinking about it as a lot of times we think about money as going to a waste when we're not using it. And so to have that one where it's like, oh, I have this other account that I check that if I need something, I know I have this other account available. So that one is a little bit easier to talk about. And Same with disability. More and more of us now, so I'm about to turn 38, more and more of us now are like at that age where we're like really thinking about stuff, for our family. And so it's a little bit easier to be like, I got this really cool disability policy and like, look what they added to it. I mean, I know it really sounds lame, but I don't know. It seems like it flows in conversation with my friends more than it used to.
Yeah. And I think a way to kind of like encourage people to have those conversations is one, get it yourself, because if you weren't so excited about it or you didn't know about it, you're not going to mention it to anyone. So first, get it for yourself, see the value in it. Again, if you die too young, you're covered. If you live too long, you're covered. If anything in between, you're covered. So to finally have a product out in the market where you're covered and you can use it while you're still alive and whenever you need it, why wouldn't somebody want to get it? Again, it comes back to not knowing what's out there for them. And so if you are thinking about getting some kind of life insurance policy, talk to a local agent, talk to somebody at InTouch Financial Group. They'll sit down with you, they'll do a needs analysis and see, okay, you're pretty young. And actually, the younger you get it, the more money you save. Because the older you are, it's going to be a pretty penny to get a good coverage. So when you start young, you have a better price for life insurance. Plus, because of the accumulated cash value that you can get from it, time is your best friend. So the longer that you let it sit is going to be better for you when you get older and you really do need that money. And so, again, it's just taking the time to know what's out there, learn a little bit more, stay informed, and take action in what you guys are thinking. If you're already thinking about it, just do it. Nike signed it. Just do it. And stay healthy, eat right, sleep, get off your phones. Just listen to the podcast and go to sleep, And then just stay informed, guys. I think there's a lot of fake news and misinformation out there. So like you said, do your research. Don't take the first comment that somebody might say. Because even in the medical field, right, you always advise for multiple what is it, like multiple views, or they say, oh, go to one doctor, go to another doctor, don't stay with the first one because it might be misdiagnosed or something like that. That's what Grey's Anatomy said. But, so mentioning about HSA, you know, not a lot of people knew that. Personally, I didn't know that you could do all of that stuff with that kind of account. Is there anything else in the medical field that you feel like people should know about?
So the health savings accounts allow you to put money into different areas that you want to put it in. So one area that I've become really interested in, and so I'll give you a quick backstory. In January of last year, I was overweight. I had always been a little bit on what I would consider the heavy side, but I had always would sit around like 200, and I got up during COVID, wasn't working out as much. I got up to 223, which is the highest I'd ever been. I felt unhealthy. I wasn't sleeping well. My sex drive was down. My mood was down. And so I kind of started looking into things myself. It's funny. Like I said, I'm an ER doctor, and I was feeling unhealthy myself. So I went and did a bunch of things. And so I went and got genetic testing, which I had never done. And genetic testing is something that can get covered through a health savings account. There's other doctors out there outside of regular primary care. They would be considered kind of in that avenue, but doctors that do more functional medicine. And it really helped me a ton because it was the first time in my life that I looked at my genetics. I looked at every aspect of my health. So I looked at my sleep, my sexual health. And when you do functional medicine, they are going to focus on stuff that regular primary cares don't sometimes. And what I mean by that is a lot of times within the primary care field, we are kind of governed by the way that we were taught. So they're going to come in and do very generic labs and make sure you don't have high blood pressure, make sure you don't have diabetes, but they often don't have the time to go in and talk about all these other things. So when I got my genetic testing, I did not realize that I had certain mutations that make it hard for me to process certain foods or certain supplements. So as soon as I learned that information, it was like I got on some supplements and my energy was better, my mood was better. So I specifically have what's called an MTHFR mutation, and that means that I can't handle regular folate. So just by changing to a methylated form of folate, it made my serotonin levels go up. It made everything way better. And I didn't even know that was an option. So with an HSA, you could see a functional medicine doctor if you wanted and do your genetic testing. And that's kind of crazy because we have sequenced the entire genome, but how many times have you ever been and talked to a doctor or somebody and they're like, hey, let's do a genetic testing and see what specifically your genetics say. And it's really important because if you did that, you could know, well, there's a lot of genetic reasons why somebody might have a higher predisposition to high blood pressure. And so that is really cool. In the functional medicine world, they'll check your estrogen levels, your testosterone levels, your genetic testing. They'll check your GI health and check and see what foods your body processes well. So when you talk about eating healthy, there might be a healthy food that your body processes well and mine doesn't, or vice versa. And you don't know that unless you sorry to say it this way, but poop in a box and send it off and find out what does your body process well. And so health savings accounts definitely allow you to look at all that stuff. Genetic testing is anywhere from $300 to $700. For most people, that's a lot of money to spend on the outside. But if you've got $5,000 left over at the end of the year in your health savings account, you can do your genetic testing. So a lot of cool options out there.
And I think some health insurance companies, now that you're mentioning what it is, I've had clients come up to me and they're like, hey, I need to get this specific health insurance because this doctor is going to do these tests on me and they only accept this health insurance. So look into your health insurance as well to see if it's covered because now I want to do that. I'm definitely going to do that.
Everyone should.
I'm calling my health insurance. Hey, is this a preventative care?
Yeah.
So thank you, honestly, for taking the time to be with us, and you gave us a lot of great information. I think our listeners are going to be very well informed, and it's kind of like non-biased a little bit because you see it day to day and you're just doing it. You're here to inform people for the better. So thank you again. And we'll see you guys on the next episode of Staying in Touch, where we'll have another guest so you guys can see what's available to you and make the best decisions for your future and your family's future. So thank you guys.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it so much.